Hello. I said that I uploaded a video to my James Bondage channel, but it turned out that the video didn't upload. I don't have my computer, and I'm trying to upload stuff on equipment that's just not very good. So that didn't happen. Although I thought it happened, but it didn't happen. So I thought one thing, but it was the other thing. And this is, I want to go into to basically some of the thought pattern that was in the video. And hopefully I'll be able to make another one for the James Bondage channel. A lot of the information I don't want to put too much information on the that's about James on my channel. I want to leave it on the James Bondage channel so that this way I can give people stuff that they're not into my view on the Book of James. They have other material that they can enjoy. So anyway, but I did want to get into some of my thought processes and why and how I think deductively. I use this thing called deductive reasoning. Now, I used to do troubleshooting for fire alarm systems, refrigeration systems, appliances. I used to troubleshoot electrical problems. And so to troubleshoot problems with an appliance or with things, you have to use use deductive reasoning. And sometimes there's something called a troubleshooting flowchart that helps you to deduce what the problem is by the symptoms. Well, let me tell you what a lot of people do. And I'll just go with a very simple circuit, a light, a lamp with a switch on it. Now, a lot of lamps have these where you plug them in the wall and you have these little dial switches that you dial them, and it goes click, 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 and it turns the light bulb on and shuts the light bulb off. Very simple little lamp. So let me give you the logic of a lot of people. Some people, the lamp's not working. Now they flip the little switch, click, 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 click. The light's not working. The light bulb must have blew. So okay, we'll take that light bulb out, and we put another light bulb in there. And we go click, click, click. The light's still not working. Well, now I got to go out and I have to find out what's wrong with it. Okay, I get my meter out and I check to see if there's power. And oh wait, it's not plugged in. Oh, that's the problem. Here I am flipping the switch and changing a light bulb, putting new light bulbs in there, and all I had to do was plug it in. Which, by the way, is a common problem. A lot of people don't even have it plugged in or don't have power. So the first thing you check for is if you have electricity running in them lines. You go to the outlet, and if the outlet doesn't have electricity, you go to the circuit breaker. If the circuit breaker doesn't give you power, well, then you call a power company, right? Or you check the main fuse. But anyway, so say, okay, you plugged it in. You're like, oh, I found the problem. You plug it in. And now you're flipping it, click, click, click. Still doesn't work. What just happened? So then, okay, you go and you check that there was power. There was power coming to the outlet. Maybe it's the switch, and you do something. You jump out the switch, which means you connect the wire from one end to the other to make sure that even if the switch is off or on, it's always on. And you jump out the circuit, or you do a continuity check, which is you run a little electricity through there, and it tells you if there's, or actually ohmage, how many ohms the switch is, and you click it, and you see if the switch is actually making the connection. Well, the switch is making the connection. The wire is good. It's going up to the light bulb, and it's going out of the light bulb, right? And then it's going to the thing, and this thing should work. So then somebody goes, well, did you change the light bulb? Yeah, I put a new light bulb in there. We'll put the old light bulb back in there. There you go, take the old light bulb and you stick it back in there and bing, the light comes on. Oh, what happened? Well, you assumed that it was the light bulb first and you didn't check to see if the light bulb was good or bad, and the light bulb that you took out was good, and the one that you took out of the package that you thought was good was actually bad. And then the person who says, oh yeah, I just to remind you, there was a light bulb I replaced in the hall, and I forgot to throw out the light bulb. I put it back in the box, and you grabbed the old light bulb. And this is how people, when they start troubleshooting a problem, go down the wrong road and come to the wrong diagnosis, right? And replace the light bulb with a bad light bulb and still can't figure it out. So, how does this relate to logic? Well, if you went along a logical process, the first thing you're going to do is make sure that you start from the power, of course, and you check everything and you eliminate one problem or the other. This person figured that they eliminated the light bulb by putting a brand new light bulb in there, but didn't check to see if the light bulb that he put in there was actually a bad light bulb. Then continued on with the problem, with solving the problem, and found that it wasn't plugged in, and figured, well, there's the problem there. And it was the original problem that it wasn't plugged in. And if he had just picked up the wire and plugged it into the outlet and flipped the switch if he needed to, the light would have come on without him having to change the bulb with a bad bulb. Now let's take a look at people and how they think about the Bible. A lot of people assume things. They make assumptions about things, or they make presumptions about things, or they go down a premise without checking to see if the premise that they're going on is actually true. They accept a premise like inerrancy or whatever without really double checking themselves, because in their mind there was no reason to check, because when you go down to the store and you buy a light bulb off the shelf, right, or you buy a package of light bulb, you expect it that when you take a bad light bulb out and you put the new one from the package in, it's going to work. So without even checking, you've assumed that what you put in there falsely was sound. And this is what happens with doctrines. Now, this idea of inerrancy has also caused people to, when they find a verse that they can't explain, to say, well, if all Scripture is true, then we can use all of the Scriptures. So now what we can do is that if it doesn't fit, or we can draw meaning from other parts of the Bible to make it fit with other parts of the Bible. So if Paul is contradicting James, all we have to do is go to Paul and say, well, since it's all true, then what James meant is what Paul meant. It's just that he meant it in a different way. And so now we can take Paul's words and put them in James's mouth, assuming that that's what he meant, because we assumed that James was actually speaking for Paul, and Paul was speaking of James, even though they contradicted each other. Oh no, it had to be apparent, so now I've got to play Twister again to try to make it fit. So now, what I do is, the first thing that I do is I look at what the person said without going to other scriptures. I don't go and look at Matthew to find out what was written by Paul. I don't go to James to figure out, what Paul wrote. I go to Paul to find out what Paul wrote, and I go to James to figure out what James wrote, before I start superimposing meaning or putting words in James' mouth that came from Paul, or words in Paul's mouth that came from James, or putting words in Jesus' mouth that came from Moses, and so on down the line. The first thing I want to look at is plainly and clearly, without putting some sort of bias in front of my eyes, exactly what it does say. And then when somebody says it doesn't say that, then I'm very reluctant to say, well, what's in front of my eyes that I see, should I now take what I see plainly in front of my eyes and be told that it means this by you? So isn't that brainwashing? Telling people that you should listen to my point of view because my point of view is the correct point of view? Or should you say, look at everybody's point of view and start to take it apart and do some real troubleshooting to find out what actually is the case? And so, yes, I do look at other scriptures, but I don't put words in the mouths of people by playing Twister, or snip Paul's words and put them in James's mouth, and snips James's words and put them in Paul's mouth. I don't agree with. I don't agree with saying, well, because the scriptures have to be inerrant, now I have to go to other parts of the scriptures to try to justify and play Twister with what I believed. to say, well, no, this actually means this and this actually means that, because based on the premise that it's inerrant. When in the scriptures themselves, or in the Bible itself, where the scriptures are contained, most of them, some of them might actually be doctrines of people who try to insert them, which people don't want to understand, but why don't we look at it objectively? So the scriptures say that wolves were going to come in sheep's clothing and introduce doctrines that were of devils, and that it was said to Timothy, watch your doctrine, and you know what happened to me in Antioch with James the Just's men from James. This is right in 2 Timothy 3, right? Just before 16, it talks about what happened to him in Antioch, Iconium, and Lystra. So you really, before you just take the snippet and take what I say, which basically I'm not telling you to believe anything I say without you actually doing your homework. You see, you have to look at, you're more broad-minded when you look at more than one perspective or the other point of view. You're more able to see it, not that you can understand it, but at least you have now sorted through the information without telling you, no, don't go look at this information, or don't go with somebody censoring you. You actually look at both points of view, and whether you're open-minded enough to be objective, that's or whether your biases hold you back. Well, that I can't help people with, except for that what you really need to do when you look at the scriptures is before you start running down the wrong road, or when you start to look at the scriptures, you should really start to try to look at it from more than one perspective, to see other people's points of view, other people's commentaries. You don't have to accept them all. But the other thing that I'd like to mention about not being fooled by your own biases and by other people's or mine is that when I'm reading, like when I read the book of Romans, for instance, I notice that there is actually a logical line of thought. Okay, it's very logical. They were Jewish, but you see there was a lot of Greek influence, and you notice that when you read Paul, he uses a lot of straightforward, fact upon fact. He builds his case like a lawyer, and you can see it as you read the book of Romans. Now, to read the nitty-gritty of it, it takes a lot of time, and so you have to get a highlighter out and see the little things that Paul says that kind of encapsulate what he's trying to say, and then read it in context and see if it fits with a logical case building point of view. So when it starts off with the greetings of in Romans, it gets a little, you're reading the greetings, and then you get down to where he says that salvation came for the Jew first and the Gentile. But the first thing that he starts to say is that without talking about the law of Moses, he's talking about everybody being without excuse, because what was known about God is seen by what is created, because we can see that a creator made something here, because we can see order in the universe, and that the rest of the world rejected their creator. And this was apart from the Jews. He's talking about all people are convicted under not the law of Moses that was given to the Jewish people. He clearly and plainly says that all people are condemned because what is plain to be known about God is seen by his creation. You can find that in Romans chapter 1. And so the case that he's building is that those people who did not have the law of Moses are condemned, just as those people who are under the law of Moses are condemned. Paul is building a case that Jew and Gentile are alike, and that all will be judged according to, not just the Jews will be judged because they have Moses' law, all people are judged and under sin because of the law that was written by God on the hearts of men and in creation itself, and that these things have been seen and known about since the creation of the beginning. So Paul is making the argument that not just the Jews, but the Gentiles alike are all condemned under sin, which means that there was a law before that, and all will be judged. But, and this is where Paul says there's a but, and a but means that although that there's a law and all men will be judged, there is now a new way apart from the law where you're not judged by the law anymore. So he says all men are judged at first, putting everybody in the category of being under sin, Jew and Gentile alike. And all will be judged according to the law, not the law of Moses, but those who are, and it says those who are going to be judged apart from the law, or those who are going to be judged by the law of Moses. It doesn't matter. So it's apart from the law of Moses, and those who have the law of Moses, meaning all people are under the law of sin. So Jesus didn't just take away Mosaic law. Jesus died for the sins of everybody, not just for the Jews under the law, but for the Gentiles also. And anybody who says that he died just to take away Jewish law, then he just died for the Jews, and so he didn't die for everybody. He didn't die. He didn't die for the Gentiles. So he didn't cover the sins of the Gentiles who are not under Moses. So if you look at it very plainly, what Paul is saying is that no, condemnation will come to the Jew first, and then to the Gentile, or to the So righteousness comes. Moses came to the Jew, then the Gentile. But it says, but there's no difference between Jew and Gentile, for all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. This is Romans chapter 3. So, but now, instead of everybody being condemned by the law, but now there's something different. So now people are not condemned under the law if they have faith. A new righteousness now comes that's apart from the law, because all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. All are freely justified by faith. And this is why right in chapter 1 it says, the just shall live by faith. It is from faith to faith, not faith to works of the law, faith to works of Moses, or faith in good works apart from Moses. For all have sinned apart from those who have sinned apart from the law of Moses, or with the law of Moses, all have fallen into sin. For there is no one righteous, no, not one. So as you read along in the arguments of Paul, he now changes it up and says, but. And when somebody says but, you have to take a look at, well, what did he exclude? Well, when he said that all were condemned and all will be judged, but then he said, but now there's a righteousness that's apart from the law. See, there was a before and after. When Paul said, but now the righteousness of God is known apart from the law, to which the law of Moses testified. It's Romans chapter 3. But now and you look at Romans chapter 8. But now there is therefore no more judgment. And the word is judgment. But now there is therefore no condemnation. The word means judgment. So all have sinned and all will be judged, apart from the law of Moses or with the law of Moses. But now there's a righteousness that's coming by faith in Jesus Christ. So you see, the first part of Paul's argument was that all are under sin. And those who are under Moses' law and those who are not under Moses' law are all condemned under sin. But now there's a righteousness that has come for the Jew and the Gentile that is apart from the law. So the Jews come to Jesus by faith, and the Gentiles, and there is no more laws on the Jews as well as there's no more laws on the Gentiles, because all of the laws that condemned them, the law of the sin that was by Adam in the garden, which was eating of the fruit of the law, because the law is the knowledge of good and evil. That's what the law tells you. It tells you what's good and what's bad. Do not do what it shows you. The law shows you it shows you how to do what's right. It's the law of righteousness. It was given to Adam and Eve. They rebelled against it and ate the fruit of it, and because they were not perfect, they died from it. And everybody has died. This is why it says in Romans chapter 5 that nevertheless, although the law of Moses came, people were dying of sin because there was a law in place that was apart from the law of Moses that was condemning people before Moses came. This is why death reigned from Adam to Moses. And Adam is a shadow of what is the one that brought all men under sin, Jew and Gentile alike. This is how Paul is building his argument from Romans chapter 1 all the way through Romans chapter 3 to Romans chapter 4 when he speaks of Abraham, and that Abraham was not given the law of Moses, okay? He was not circumcised yet, but he believed God about the new country that was coming to come, that his offspring, and those were those who by faith would accept the faith of Abraham, those would be his seed, and that he was given righteousness before he was given circumcision, which was a sign of the law coming to Abraham. So before Abraham had Isaac and the sacrifice on the altar happened, he was already considered righteous because of believing what God said, even though the fruition of Christ had not come yet, and that what he did was a sign to show that the Messiah is coming. You see, the Jews were not given Christ. Even when Christ was preaching, he had not fulfilled the law yet, so he could say very plainly that if your righteousness is not better than the righteousness, there is no way that you could get to heaven. Because at the time, what was prophesied about, the shadow of what's to come, did not happen until he was hung on the cross. But after he was hung on the cross and he died for our sins, he rose from the dead, showing that now there is a righteousness apart from the law. So when he was saying to people, gouge out your eye and cut off your hand, it is better to get into the kingdom of heaven. And it was silly because even if you cut off your hand, you couldn't stop yourself with sinning. You might just as well gouge your eyes out, cut off your hand, and cut off other parts of your body. See no evil, hear no evil, think no evil, and there's other parts that you might have to cut off to make yourself good enough to get to heaven. It's impossible to get there. But what Christ was saying is there's no way that you can get to heaven. But I have come to fulfill the law. And he did. But it did not take place. The fruition of this did not happen until all of the signs that the Jews had sacrifices that pointed to the Christ did not come to fulfillment until he actually hung on the cross and died for their sins. Then he raised up from the dead, showing that now you don't have to worry about trying to get to heaven by trying to cut off your hand and parts of your body, because now the righteousness that comes is not your own righteousness, which is silly because even by cutting off body parts, you can't get into the kingdom of heaven without the righteousness that comes from Christ. And there is no way that even if your righteousness is better than the Pharisees, even if your righteousness has to be much better than the Pharisees, it has to be perfect to get into the kingdom of heaven, and nobody is perfect except for Jesus Christ. So when he said to the Jews who had not had the fruition of what they were, all of the sacrifices and all the things that they have done in the past had not come to fruition yet. So when Jesus said, you have to have more righteousness than the righteousness of the Pharisees, because he had come to fulfill the law, but he had not fulfilled it at that time. After he had fulfilled the law, he sat down at the right hand of the Father. He had fulfilled the law by dying on the cross. He who was sinless, he was raised up from the dead. And it wasn't the law of Moses. He took everybody. If that was the case, then he just took the Jews' sins away. But the Gentiles still had to follow Moses and be Jewish in order for their sins to be taken away. So basically you're telling them to be Jewish again, and you're telling them that Jesus just died for Mosaic law. Jesus did not just die for Mosaic law. For sin reigned from Adam to Moses. There was sin in the world before that. Apart from the law of Moses, something else. And this is why in Romans it says that the things of creation, although they knew that God was there, they started worshiping the sun, beasts. They were making idols. Although it was clear that the God of the universe made all these things, they bowed down in their vile minds, and they didn't worship God, nor did they worship by their human minds. This wasn't talking about the Jews. This was talking about everybody in the world was under the law, and they were all denying God. They were all condemned. And they were hypocrites because they were judging people, other people, according to their law, not the law of Moses, but their own law. And you can look at in Romans chapter 2 where it says that you who judge, who are Gentiles, other people according to your law, you'll be judged by the same law that you judge other people by. And then he said it to the Jews, you who judge people under the law will be judged by the same law. But all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God, because Jesus Christ came to take away all of sin. The sin of Adam, the sin that was in the garden, which makes sense, because remember the prophecy that came to Adam and Eve when he said, I will put enmity between your seed and the seed of the woman. This wasn't speaking to Moses, this was talking to Adam and Eve, saying that you have sinned, and there's going to come somebody, a seed, the seed of sin is in you, and now somebody's going to come and be struck in the heel by Satan, and he is going to crush Satan's head. He wasn't talking to the Jews because the Jews had not had the law of Moses yet. He was talking about the death that came from the law of the knowledge of good and evil when Adam and Eve ate of the fruit that was in the garden. Therefore, when Jesus died on the cross, he did not die for just Mosaic law. He died to take the law of sin and death away completely. And that's what James was talking about in Romans chapter 5. And since death has come, we have all died in Christ, and now we live in his righteousness, the righteousness that not only covered us from Mosaic law, but also the law of the knowledge of good and evil that all men were condemned by. And so Jesus Christ is the propitiation for the sins of the Jews under Mosaic law and the sins of the Gentiles that were under all law, because Jews and Gentiles alike are still under all law, for death reigned from Adam to Moses. So the law was taken away because it was the fruition of it came. No longer do Jews have to follow Mosaic law, and this is why it said to Peter, kill and eat. So no, nobody has to follow Mosaic law anymore. That was removed. But the people from James, the men from James, were telling people that no, you can't be saved without going back to Moses. That was taken away by Jesus, and Paul preached against it. Paul preached against the men from James. They were not being straightforward with the gospel, and Paul said that we come to Jesus by faith. And this is what he wrote Paul wrote in Romans. This is the whole argument that Paul wrote about in Romans. And this is where where the just are to live by faith, that the law has been removed, and that now we live by the righteousness that comes by faith. And then you'll say, well, we can sin all we want. And I'm saying that's the most ignorant thing, because Paul said, shall we sin that grace abound? He said, shall we sin, since we are no longer under law but under grace? So as much as you argue with it, Paul answered you. The sin, not just of Moses, but all the law was taken away, so that there's a new righteousness apart from the law. Apart from the law of Moses, apart from all law that has come for Jew and Gentile alike. Because the Jews were under the law of, and the Gentiles were also under the law of sin before, according to Adam. This is, if you read through, and please read it over and over, you can try to twist the context around, but when you look at it very closely, this is how Paul builds his argument in the book of Romans. And we can start to go over Romans 1, verse by verse, and I can show you that. Thank you very much.